It was Ernest Gordon who said, "To be free, I reckon that's why I joined the Second War to end all wars. I was at the university studying to be a teacher when the call to arms occurred. I was only too eager to put aside my studies for the glory of action. I stopped reading history and became a part of it." I'm sure he, as many others, could never have imagined where that choice would lead him. The book, Through the Valley of the Kwai, the autobiography of the Scottish captain Ernest Gordon, based upon the actual events during World War II, when 61,000 Allied prisoners of war, including Gordon, were forced to build the Thailand-Burma Railway. It's one of, sadly, many examples that we could recount from history, we could reflect on, where human life was deemed, well, simply a means to an end, of little or no value, a commodity, being very harsh, but truth of the situation, simply to further the plans of others. This came to mind as I was preparing, as we continue our series, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, based upon the book by John Mark Comer, because part of this series, I believe, is reminding ourselves that we are not just cannon fodder. We are not just some kind of pack horses. We're not simply fuel for the machines of culture and society. That is not why we were created. If you've not been following this series thus far, I'd encourage you to catch up on our YouTube channel, where you can find obviously the full gatherings week by week, but also the sermons. As I say, inspired by the book by John Mark Comer of the same name. It's a case, just once again, for slow over a culture of speed. The world, in many ways, is going as fast as it can, because the theory is, as we've thought about the last couple of weeks already, that speed will bring, greater happiness, achievement, acceptance, position, wealth, and whatever it is that we're seeking for. And we'll all have our trigger points. We'll all have different things that will, kind of drive us on. And there'll be difference if we were to share them, but there'll be those things that we can so easily get caught up in. And over the last 2 weeks, obviously, we've reflected on the problem and the solution, the problem being hurry, the solution being the way of Jesus, following in his footsteps, remembering, that sense of it's not about doing less, but it is about being more. And so we come to consider 4 practices for unhurrying, the first of which we're going to be looking at today. Comer describes them quite helpfully, I think, in a sense that it's trying to say, how do we take this idea of the ruthless elimination of hurry, how do we take that from our minds into our muscle memory? Into our bodies, into the actions of our daily lives. It's not enough to simply think about it, but actually we need to apply it and live it, and for it to be evident each day as we go through life on that path towards an elimination of hurry, recognizing that we're going to come across challenges, we're going to get it wrong, but how is that the trajectory that we are seeking to journey along? So practices, maybe another way we might think of it is in terms of spiritual disciplines. From the off, I'd want to just state the obvious that the 4 that we're going to look at are not the exhaustive list. They are 4 that I think are going to be really helpful for us, but there are other things. Dallas Willard, his definition of a spiritual discipline, which Comer himself references, is this. He says, the disciplines are activities of mind and body purposely undertaken to bring our personality and total being into effective cooperation with the divine order. They enable us more and more to live in a power that is, strictly speaking, beyond us, deriving from the spiritual realm itself. Now, these practices, these disciplines, as we're going to think about, they were modeled by Jesus. He did these things, and then he said to others, follow me. follow my example, follow the things that I am doing. In many ways, I suppose my hope and my prayer for this sermon and the remaining of this series in particular, well, the phrase that came to me this week was to elevate the possible, to elevate the what if, because it's so easy to come up with, and we'll look at this, the excuses or the reasons why it won't work for me and my situation, but actually to say, okay, God, move in me, take me forward from where I find myself. So this morning we turn to practice 1, silence and solitude. Might ask the question, why? Well, straight up, because it's what Jesus modeled. It's what we see him doing, spending time with the Father in prayer, alone by himself, away from the busyness of life. Mark 1:35 is the verse that I'm kind of going to bounce off this morning, if you will. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Mark 1, verse 35. In 1851, it was the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard who wrote about creating silence. And commenting on this, Brian Heasley of 24/7 Prayer, he says, I like that he didn't say find silence. He said create silence. For us to create an undistracted, windowless silence, Heasley goes on, where we can be fully focused and present, a degree of intentionality is required. A degree of intentionality is required. We need to choose to do it. I'm not going to spend time aside with God the Father if I don't choose to, because there are 101 other things that I could easily fill my time with. Now, as the Tremolos would say, silence is golden. But John got that one at least. But I think it is something that we can encounter, we can experience, and we can create. And it's something that, I suppose, if we think about it, is both external as well as internal. St. Augustine, he apparently said, entering silence is entering into joy. Entering silence is entering into joy. Now, maybe that really resonates with you this morning. Maybe not so much. You know, if you can imagine maybe back to when, or you're in this situation, if you're a parent of a 2-year-old toddler, as much as you love them, a little bit of silence at the end of the day, or silence in the middle of the night, I'm sure would be the thing you would long for the most. Yet on the flip side, if you live by yourself, or your children have all grown up, or you've been bereaved, then actually silence can be the very worst thing. And so it's important to grasp here that when we think about silence, it doesn't necessarily mean the absence of all sound or noise. Which is why I think it's quite helpful, as it's offered here, to think of it as kind of half of an equation, if you will. Silence and solitude. For me, I was thinking about when I first probably kind of came across the idea of solitude. For me, it was probably through the films of Steve McQueen, The Great Escape and Papillon. Because in those, McQueen's characters usually ended up in solitary confinement, where at times that would be obviously on their own, but at times there would be no noise, maybe in extreme situations, no even kind of light. And we might kind of think, hold on a second, is that what this is talking about? Is that what we're suggesting? That we need to find space and time where we're literally locked away? Not at all. That's not what is being suggested here. And Comer helpfully points out that solitude, as we're looking at it, refers to when we're alone with God and with our own soul. It's not about isolation. It's not about separation. And Comer actually goes as far to say that the two are worlds apart. It's about finding that space away from the distractions of the world. And as Jenny said last week, and as I said the week before, and that's reminded to us that that's going to look different for each of us. Some of us, it's really able to just kind of switch off from those things around us. For others, actually, if there's a little bit of noise in the background, Emma could tell you some amusing stories of what winds me up at home. When you're trying to concentrate, and the littlest things can just, but for others, it'll be absolutely fine. And so it's working through, what does this look like for us? Again, Brian Heasley writing on the subject in regards to the many things that can distract us from spending time with God. He says this, he said, before this sounds like a rant against technology, I think it is useful to understand that really the biggest hindrance to me getting into a room, locking the door and praying to my unseen Father lies in my mind, not in my devices. Again, it's that choice. So much of this is about the decision that we make, that I make, that you make, personally, to engage or not. And I do believe there's a strong kind of, collective application here, but it starts with me, it starts with you, it starts with that personal choice and response. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, do as I say, not as I do. I wrote this in my notes on Wednesday afternoon, and only that evening, actually, Gary said it while he was doing a warm-up on Wednesday evening, as he was kind of instructing them in various activities. It was recorded apparently back as far as the 17th century by a guy called John Selden, which is all great. Unfortunately, it was in a treatise he wrote about preachers. Apparently, he wrote, preachers say, do as I say, not as I do. So we'll move swiftly on from that point. But when it comes to Jesus, we have, an example of someone whose words and actions aligned perfectly. Preachers, let's be honest, they're human, we're human. We'll say things at times, and actually we don't always match it up. Whereas with Jesus, there is no instance where that ever happened. He modeled everything that he asked of those who followed him. And so it's in this context that we see Jesus modeling time with the Father away from the busyness of life. I read Mark 1:35 a few moments ago, but that's not the sole example that we see of Jesus doing this. There's a whole list of them. Luke 4, after his baptism, spends 40 days in the wilderness. Mark 6, having fed the 5,000, a massive event again. He takes his way off. Luke 5 tells of how Jesus withdrew often to lonely places and prayed. Matthew 14, after hearing of the death of John the Baptist, again, he goes aside by himself. Luke 6 records spending the night on a mountainside praying. And then Luke 22 in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night he was betrayed. More than one occasion, he takes himself off just for him to be alone with the Father. By choice, spending that time, recognizing the importance of getting away from it all. But returning to Mark 1:35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. He valued that time apart, that silence and that solitude. And in many ways, if he needed it, then I certainly know I do. I can't speak for you, but I see in Jesus something that I know I need to seek after and run after. So in the early hours of the morning we read, he leaves the house, he goes off, and it's to this solitary place, the NIV puts it. The Passion Translation terms it a secluded place. The Contemporary English, a place where he could be alone. The Good News Bible, he went out of town, they say, to a lonely place. In the American Standard, it's he rose up, went out, and departed into a desert place. I mean, the Greek word that is used is the same word to describe the wilderness where John the Baptist preached. This is not just kind of head out the house into the garden and stand by the back door. For Jesus, this is a deliberate step that he is taking. It was this purposeful time aside, away from everything else. And again, just in case we missed the why, Jesus did this so he could pray, so he could commune with God the Father. theologian James Edwards, he says, the work of the Son of God is both inward and an outward work. Jesus cannot extend himself outward in compassion without first attending to the source of his mission and purpose with the Father. And conversely, his oneness with the Father compels him outward in mission. So what do we make of this? How could we take this forward and apply it into our lives? Well, firstly, I just want to clear two potential misunderstandings up that could come our way. Jesus, we read, went out early in the morning. So the question could be asked, so is the time of day important? Is this kind of the champion for, unless you get up, 5 in the morning, then it's actually not got any real value to it? Or is it actually kind of the middle of the night that is being suggested here? No, that's not what we see. We see this example of Jesus, and it's taking the heart and the actions, but recognizing that this is not a strict model that we need to apply ourselves to. Secondly, Jesus went out into the wilderness. So again, is it, okay, maybe not middle of the night or early in the morning, but is this suggesting that unless you go out to the middle of a field or somewhere kind of, miles away, that you're not really going to be able to connect with God? Again, the answer is no. That may be that at times actually is getting out in creation and actually finding that physical space, going for a long walk is what you need. But the reality is that that's, again, not what Jesus is talking about here. Secondly, and again, I want to quickly respond to the excuses that I know I battle with in my life, and maybe are the same for you. That sense of saying, well, I don't have the time for this, actually. I love the idea of silent solitude, getting aside with God, but actually I don't have the time. I've got commitments, I've got pressures, I've got things I've got to do, and so on and so forth. Or can I have 101 reasons, or maybe not 101, but I have a load of reasons as to why, well, I don't need this. Silent solitude, time aside with God, for the person sitting next to me or someone else, yes, but I'm okay. I'm good. I don't need this. Or maybe it's that excuse of saying, well, it just doesn't work for me. I've tried it, and it's just not how I'm wired. Spending time alone with God, no, I don't need. I would want to lovingly, but firmly challenge those excuses and any others that we come up with. Because I don't believe any of them hold water. Because I think it is part of what it means to be in that relationship with Jesus, seeking to walk with the Father, filled with the Spirit. And actually, if we kind of go, well, actually, this doesn't really work for me, then we are missing not only the point, but the opportunity we have to grow in our faith. Jesus, he got up. It took effort. It was a choice. He prayed. It was for a purpose. He used at that time. And again, the relationship with the Father was of paramount importance to him. Time aside with God is a must. And so, what can we do next? Where do we take this? In a moment, I want to pray for us. I want to pray for particularly any who want to respond, saying, actually, no, I want to. I don't know maybe how I should respond, but I want to respond in this. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing that this is something that I need to engage with, whether more fully or in a new way. And I think nothing can maybe beats that step, taking that physical step. So in a moment, I want to pray. But also maybe it's actually thinking, what one thing can I do this week? So this doesn't just become, well, that's a great idea, and I get it into my mind, but actually it doesn't make my muscle memory. It doesn't actually ever get outworked in my life. Maybe for you, it's actually going, no, I'm going to go home today, and I'm going to set the alarm 15 minutes earlier tomorrow. And actually, that's, it's not hours or anything. We hear about these people through history who get up at 3 a.m. and pray for, 15 minutes. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to determine to get up and use those 15 minutes, so not just kind of lie there for 15 minutes, but that. Maybe it's actually going, rather than sit on my phone during my lunch break, I'm going to go for a walk. And I'm going to use that time, once I've eaten my sandwiches at work or whatever, and I'm going to use that time, and I'm going to pray that God will meet with me as I take that space. Maybe it's that decision. So on the way to work, or as I'm traveling this week, as I'm going about my business, I'm not just going to put the radio on or whatever it is I choose to listen to, however much it might be a great worship track. Actually, I'm going to give that space over to God. and say, God, will you speak? Will you move? Maybe it's as I read the paper each day, and there's that rhythm already in my life. I have kind of habits saying, well, okay, how before or after that, something that I do regularly, how will I seek to create this space of silence alongside it? Again, it'll be different for each of us. It's not straightforward. None of this is easy, but it's about being intentional and saying, how can we grow in our relationship? With this, I want to finish. I'm guessing if you've got a water butt in your garden, at the moment, it's probably fairly full. If it's anything like the two that are at the end of the workshop in our garden, they are kind of full to overflowing. Because obviously at this time of year, it tends to rain a lot, and if you're like me, actually, we're not using any of the water. Maybe if you've got a greenhouse or that sort of thing, you might, but actually, there's very little watering to be done at this time of year. So the water butt fills up, and there's an absolute ton of water. There's loads of it sloshing about. You could have a bath in it, wouldn't be very nice, but, there's tons of it. Give it a few months, though, and the chances are, well, it'll be a very different situation. There'll probably be some point in the summer where your water butt may actually get completely barren and empty because you will be using it to water the plants, whatever it is you have in your garden. And actually, if there's not a lot of rainfall, then it won't have filled up, and it will get to that point where it will be completely empty. Now, the thing to be aware of is that, and someone pointed this out to me in the illustration, you don't move your water butt round the garden when it rains, do you? If you do, then I'm more than happy to encourage you in other practices, because that's not how a water butt works. The idea is you set it up, you might have a drain, a down pipe or something you plug it into or whatever, a bit of guttering, and as the rain comes, it catches it and it fills it up. Now, it's asking that question, what is it that we're being filled with? How are we being blessed by God? How are we putting ourselves in that right place so we can receive from him? Because there's going to come times when we're going to really need him. And actually, if we're not inputting and allowing him to feed us, making that space and that time, creating, we might call it a quiet time, but creating those rhythms, those habits, that actually, when we really do need to cry out to him, actually, it's going to be harder work. Because we don't have those things in place. He will be there. He will hear us. But why not actually help ourselves by growing closer to him? So whether it's first thing in the day, as we do certain activities, or, as we go to a certain place, may we recognize the benefit of spending time with God and that he always has more for us. We are not cannon fodder. We're not pack horses or simply fuel for the machines of culture or society. We are created, you are created by a loving God who longs to spend time with you and for you to grow with him. I'm going to invite the band to come back. I want us, as we move, we're going to sing in a moment, but as we respond, as I said, I want to invite you this morning, if this is something that you really feel prompted about, that you want to move in, you want to say, yes, God, I want you to help me, I want you to prompt me, I want you to show me the way forward, then I want to just invite you, in a moment I'm going to pray, I want to invite you to stand. Not because it's magic, not because it does anything special, but just because it is that sign to God of saying, actually, yeah, this is something that I want your help in. I want to move forward in. So if that's you, then I just invite you in this moment just to stand where you are. If you're not physically able to stand, you may want to put your hands out. But there's that response to God. And then I'm just going to pray, and then the band are going to lead us. Let's pray. Lord, as we gather here today, we gather as a very varied bunch of individuals. We come from different walks of life. We have different experiences. Our heritage in terms of the life that we've lived varies. But as we find ourselves here today, pray that you will move by your Spirit afresh. And for those of you who have responded particularly this morning, Lord, I pray that you will fill them with your Spirit right now, Lord. I pray, Lord, that you will pour upon them, that you will equip them, that you will encourage them, that you will prompt them as to how they can move forward with you, Lord. Thank you for their willingness, Lord, and I pray that over the next few days that they will hear your voice, they will see you moving as they respond, that you will guide and prompt them. Help us, Lord, as we seek to journey through life, to hear your voice speaking above all the voices in this world, that we may be a part of your kingdom coming in this place. Amen.